Hiya. I'm back here on the gray sofa in front of the gray wall here in Texas to talk to you today about some more of my favorite British phrases and words, specifically from the North. I did a video last year about some of my favorite British phrases, and one of them was mustn't grumble. I love that phrase. And so for those of us who do on occasion enjoy complaining or whining a bit, I made these shirts, must grumble. So before you write in the comments and say, the saying is mustn't grumble, not must grumble, you got it wrong, you silly American. I know it's kind of a joke. So anyway, if you haven't seen that first video of my favorite British phrases, please check that out. I will link it in the description. And if you want your own must grumble t-shirt or jumper, then you can check out that link in the description too to my merch store. But today I want to talk about more favorite phrases, and specifically ones from up north, because I just finished this whole vlog series of Yorkshire and all of our recent travel adventures there. And if you've been around my channel for a while, you know we've also had some wonderful adventures in County Durham and Northumberland. We love the North. And not just the Northeast, we love Liverpool and Manchester as well. So we really enjoy traveling all over Britain. And for those of you who are new to my channel, hi, I'm Vera, and I'm an American who's married to my husband Ian, a dual citizen who has been a British citizen all his life and became an American citizen a while back because of being married to me and living here in the US for many years. But a few years ago, as we retired, we decided to split our time between here in Texas, where we spend about 7 months of the year, and then spend our summers in Britain, in Gloucestershire specifically. So today, let's talk about the North and some fun phrases and sayings and terms that I've enjoyed learning about. So what I thought I would do, because I love British TV shows, and a couple weeks ago I published a vlog about when we went to Grassington in Yorkshire, which is the location of the most recent adaptation of All Creatures Great and Small. So I love so many British TV shows. I thought it'd be fun to talk about specifically words and phrases I learned from watching British TV shows. So starting with Last Tango in Halifax. This obviously is a show that's set in Halifax area, and that show taught me some words I'd never heard before. I'm not sure if they're all technically Northern England in origin or Scottish or both, but words like knout. And I remember, watching the show with subtitles, of course, because some of those Northern accents are a little hard for me to understand. So watching the show with subtitles, I'm like, knout? What's knout? And I was like having to look it up, use my context clues to figure out it meant nothing. And then summit, also another word kind of similar to knout, but the opposite. That was a fun one to learn. Also, cannae and dinnae. And forgive me if my American accent is not doing justice to these words, but I just loved learning like I can't, I didn't, cannae and dinnae. I love those. I'm not saying I actually use those in my everyday language because I don't think I could get away with saying those, but I love hearing people with Northern accents say them. One word that I do co-opt on occasion is the word I. I just love saying, instead of saying yes, saying I. That's a good word. Another little phrase or just a way of speaking that I picked up in Last Tango in Halifax is when the actors who starred in that show were speaking. They were mature actors with adult children, and they would talk about their children, especially the husband. He would say, our Jillian. He was always worried about our Jillian, as he should be, because her life was a mess. And I just thought that was so cute that they would refer to people as our whatever before their name. So I thought that was really charming and endearing. Speaking of terms of endearment, let's talk about Vera. And if you've seen my Newcastle vlog, you know I'm mad about the show Vera. And if you haven't seen my Newcastle vlog, I'll link that in the description too, because we had just the best, most fun time visiting Newcastle. But I really went to Newcastle because of Vera. Well, also because of Boppy probably, but definitely because of Vera. Having watched that show and watched so many areas around Newcastle, I just had to see it for myself. And one term of endearment that gets used a lot in that show is calling people love. Now, obviously, I knew that word because that's a very common British term of endearment and one that I also use with people. One that Vera can get away with saying, and I haven't attempted to say myself, is calling people pet. Vera is famous for referring to people as pet, and it's also interesting when she's like interrogating suspects and she calls them pet. I think that's kind of funny, but I don't think I could get away with calling people pet. Maybe I'll try sometime. Do you think I should try? Let me know in the comments. Here is probably my favorite phrase that I've heard Vera say when she was trying to get her partner to come with her and go on some drive to question people. She said, "Get a wiggle on," telling him to hurry up. I'm like, that's awesome. Get a wiggle on. I'll have to remember that one. Another phrase that is used more than once in the show is the phrase happy families. And again, this is me using context clues to try and understand the meaning of this, so you can tell me if I have it wrong. And I've also heard this phrase used in the series Annika, which, not to go off on a huge tangent, but if you have not watched the series Annika and you have Amazon TV or Prime Video, you have to watch that show. It is so good. It's actually set in Scotland. And the actress, who's been in a bunch of things, including Last Tango in Halifax, she plays the head of a marine homicide unit in Scotland. But anyway, both in Annika and in Vera, I've heard this term happy families, and it's when they're talking about, you know how these shows are, they always have a person who's murdered, who seemed like a lovely person. Everyone loved them. Nobody disliked this person. They led a model, exemplary life. And then as the show goes on, you learn all these secrets about them. They were doing this and they were doing that, and they were involved with all these wrong sorts of people doing all these horrible types of things. And then, of course, there's 6 or 7 different suspects who all have motives to have killed them. But in that process of discovery, they'll use this phrase of, they looked like happy families. And I think it means like they looked like the perfect family. They looked like the model family. But there was a darker, more sinister side to what was going on with them. This is another great phrase that I heard on Vera. She said, let me get this right, "Your coat was on a shaky peg." I think that means you were like hanging by a string, rather tenuous. Anyway, I thought that was a really interesting phrase that I had not heard before. Here's another one that you would never hear in the US, but it's brilliant and very descriptive. And not only will you not hear it in the US, but Americans wouldn't even know what it means. And that is, like wading through red tape and treacle. Isn't that a great image of how you're just slogging through something, like walking through quicksand? So I thought that was awesome as well. Another phrase I've heard on Vera that I've actually heard or read subscribers saying this in the comments is "fill your boots." Not something we say in the States, but I think it means just like eat up, just eat all you want, fill your boots. And then another phrase is "sling his hook." I actually don't know what that means. So please explain to me in the comments what "sling his hook" means. It sounds like something that would be said in perhaps a coastal area, but I don't know what it means. And then this phrase, "up the duff." I don't like that phrase. It sounds nasty. It just means pregnant, but yeah, that is not a phrase that sounds like what polite people would say. Although I think it's pretty common in the in the UK, and I don't think it's considered offensive or vulgar there, but sounds kind of dirty to me. And that's one that I did hear on Vera. And then the last one from Vera is, and I've heard her say this, I think on more than one occasion, who is he when he's at home? She's also said that about things, like, who's that when they're at home? And it means when you say either a big complicated word or a big kind of formal sounding name, she is translating that to, well, what's the thing that, they would be called commonly at home? Or what's the everyday way of saying that? Because that's too kind of obtuse and erudite. So I think that that's what that means. So if I've missed the nuance, please clarify that for me in the comments. Feel free. Okay, moving on to the next one. All Creatures Great and Small. Y'all know I love that show if you've watched my video from Grassington, but such a beautiful, charming, entertaining show. And they do have some good phrases that I heard there. One of them is that someone had a right ding-ding, which I think means they had a big fight. I've certainly never heard that one before. And that kind of sounds like something that maybe was said back in the 1920s or 30s, which maybe isn't said anymore. So tell me if that is archaic, or do you guys still talk about people having a right ding-ding? Saying ta for thanks, and particularly like when you're leaving somewhere to say ta. It's kind of like saying cheers, I think, in the South, means thank you. And saying ta is very northern. That's something that I also heard on All Creatures, which I wasn't really familiar with. This is my favorite phrase. Favorite from All Creatures, and probably favorite that I'm going to mention this entire video. I don't think that Ian likes me saying this phrase, so I probably can't get away with saying it on a regular basis, but it's so funny. And it refers to someone being frugal. Ian can be a pretty frugal or miserly person, so that's probably why he doesn't want me saying this, but is this not the greatest phrase ever? It's something that Helen said, I think when describing her father. She said, tighter than an otter's bottom. Is that not hilarious? I love that so much. I mean, I'm an otter-loving gal, and that is just really funny. So I think I should be allowed to say that just because it's so hilarious. Okay, and then here's one more phrase that I heard on All Creatures, and I honestly have no idea what it means. So I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to use it in context. I think that the line was, when I got news of your divorce, I was cock-a-hoop. I have no idea what that means. I've heard of cock-a-leaky soup, but I don't know what cock-a-hoop means. So please explain that to me in the comments as well, if you would. Now let's move to another show that is set up north. This one is actually set in Scotland. And it's Shetland, set obviously in the Isles of Shetland. This show is so fantastic. Again, if you haven't watched this, you gotta. I think that the books are written by the same person that wrote Vera. So not surprising that I love both of them. Great series, great acting, a beautiful scenery, very unique, atmospheric scenery there in Shetland. And I only have a couple things that I'll mention that I've heard there. So one of them, this is probably my favorite Scottish word, is bairn. Again, I don't think I could get away with saying that here in the States because people wouldn't know that bairns are children, but it's just such a charming term. I think I love saying that, bairns or grandbairns for grandkids. And then here's a phrase that I heard on Shetland. I'm like, oh, I got to write that one down. That one is weird. I'm never going to use this phrase, but it was memorable. They said he was wandering like a fart in a trance. Have you guys ever heard that one before? I think that's a strange one, but very memorable, isn't it? Very, very colorful. Okay, so in addition to all those TV show phrases, I have to share with you some sayings that when I did my first video about favorite British sayings, I got lots of comments from people sharing interesting things that they grew up hearing from their mother, their nan, their auntie, whatever, that they thought were really funny and that are particularly northern. So here's one of them. He couldn't knock a skin off a rice pudding. I think that means someone is a weakling. That's funny. Very, again, it just really brings up imagery into your head when you hear that phrase. Another one is rips my knitting, which is similar to the phrase grinds my gears. I heard both of those phrases when I did the Americanisms that Britons hate video, because there's lots of things that really bug British people. And those things rip their knitting or grind their gears. This goes, we talked about an otter's bottom earlier. This is a similar phrase, and that is rough as a badger's backside. That's a good one. I bet a hedgehog would have a rough backside as well, but I don't think that's a saying. This is a lovely one. We've said a lot of negative things. Here's a nice, optimistic, pleasant one, and it is, if the sky falls, then we shall catch it. That's a way of just being kind of optimistic and looking on the bright side. So I thought that was a lovely saying. And then to include another northern place, and that is Northern Ireland. I think that's where this phrase first originated, and that is wind your neck in. Let me see if I have this right in the context of how you use it. I think it means to tell someone to calm down, like, wind your neck in. But tell me if I have that right. Not sure I'm going to say it, because I think people would probably be mad at me if I told them to wind their neck in. Again, let me know if I'm using that correctly. And then just to finish this out, I have to include a few sayings that I really should have put in the first video, but I didn't know them. I hadn't heard them before. They aren't northern, but they're so fantastic that I have to include them in this video as an addendum to the first one. This one is as useful as a chocolate teapot. Is that not like the most British phrase ever? An American would never use that. We don't really talk about teapots, but you get exactly what it means. It is something that's totally useless. So, chocolate teapot. Again, love that imagery. And then these last two are phrases that you use when describing someone who is acting childish. And the first one is throwing their toys out of the pram. Again, if you said that to an American, they would probably have no clue what you're talking about, but it is just hilarious sounding. Stop throwing your toys out of the pram, which is similar to spitting out their dummy. And since we don't call dummies dummies, we call them pacifiers. Americans wouldn't know what that means either, but again, someone who's throwing a tantrum, being childish, spitting out their dummy. And then one last one, which again is another barnyard saying and is so colorful, I wanted to include it, even though it's from South Wales, so it really doesn't belong in a video about the North, but I'm throwing it in as one last honorable mention, and that is the saying, so tired I could sleep on a chicken's lip. That is a colorful one as well. Love it. Anyway, please leave in the comments other phrases or sayings that you think are delightful and amusing from up north or even elsewhere, or leave a comment in the other video. And if you haven't watched the other video, watch that one first in case whatever one you want to tell me is already mentioned there. Be sure to subscribe so that you are around for the upcoming fun, because we're going to have a lot more British conversations and British travel vlogs. So I hope you join us. Thanks so much for watching this video, and do something good in the world today.